Roger, it's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Great honor to be here with you.
And so one of the reasons that we are here, and one of the things that the Dutch are very interested in, is how the same themes and subjects are dividing the political landscape in America as are in Europe. We're fighting the World Economic Forum, we're fighting the increased censorship, we're fighting the ridiculous climate change measures. And how do you see the political landscape evolving right now? Because you've been watching it for decades. You're probably one of the most senior people in and around the White House. What's happening here, and how are we going to bring this together?
Well, we're most definitely in the exact same fight.
Yes.
It is party does not matter, Republican, Democrat. These are all Hegelian devices that they just use to divide us. It's almost like a kabuki dance. It's theater.
It's a cartel.
It is a cartel. And there was a time in America that the wealthiest people, that the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful capitalists were conservatives, were Republicans. That is no longer the case. So the irony today is that these malefactors of great wealth want to end anybody else's ability to become wealthy.
Just like BlackRock, Vanguard,
precisely,
the super investors.
So I still think it's almost comical the way the leaders of the World Economic Forum act like Batman villains, and they are kind of laughable. But there's nothing funny about their agenda. First, of course, is flooding our countries with illegal immigrants, with no knowledge of who they are, what their backgrounds are, why they're coming here. And in the United States, certainly a disproportionate number of young military-age men, not families, not children, flooding into the country
through Mexico,
through Mexico, through Arizona, and so on. So on the one hand, the Biden administration asks for $29 million to build walls. On the other hand, there are 118 gates that are welded open on the Arizona-Mexican border. We've taken in 16 million people. This has both a short-term and a long-term goal for the globalists. In the short term, they wish to sow chaos, a crime epidemic, a fentanyl drug epidemic, general spike in crime across the country, a bursting of the social system so that cities like New York and Chicago are now talking about a 9% or a 10% cut in hospitals, the policing, education, in order to pay for essentially the housing and upkeep of the illegals. We're talking about another pandemic, which I think is a very real possibility.
Why do you think they're scheming?
Well, why do they always announce their plans in advance? So
yes.
How could Bill Gates know that we're about to have another pandemic? How could he possibly know that? So I think we face the same common enemy, and their agenda is right out in the open. They don't even hide their agenda. It's not like the communists of the 30s or the 40s or the 50s. These people's agenda is right out front.
But people don't believe it. They're like, oh, well, it can't be that bad. Well, that's what we see in the Netherlands.
Oh, it's like ask the farmers in the Netherlands how it's going. Ask them whether their land is really being confiscated. Ask them whether they're really being prevented from farming and producing food for the people of your country and elsewhere in Europe. What is the answer? Well, there's only one answer, very sadly, and his name is Donald J. Trump. The West needs a leader. The West needs a leader who is tough and resilient, and more importantly, who understands this entire problem. Now, I would argue that in his first term, while he was a very great president, I don't think he quite understood the dystopian future that these people have in mind for us. But he understands now, which is why they're trying to lock him up, which is why we have this tsunami of lawfare being waged against him. Ironically, it's having the exact reverse effect of what they desire, meaning the more fraudulent legal accusations against him, the stronger he grows with the American people, and the more likely that it is that he will return to the White House. Could he get elected from a prison cell? Yes, at this point he
Really?
could. Well, if gasoline prices are at $10 a gallon, which is where they're headed, 76% increase in the cost of groceries, inflation destroying the buying power of the dollar, shipping billions of dollars to the Middle East, shipping billions of dollars to Ukraine. When we have 370,000 homeless veterans in this country, yes, I think people are getting nostalgic for the policies, for the peace and prosperity that we had under Donald Trump, and they're anxious to return to it. So I'm also a believer in God, a believer in God's destiny for this country, and I think in the end that he will return to power. And now the West will have a leader, and our allies in Europe will have a leader, and somebody will lead the charge against the World Economic Forum.
Right, because that's one of the things that I think are for the Dutch viewers really interesting. We have elections coming up in November 22nd, so that's quite fast. And we've been the only party that ran on a platform of identifying the World Economic Forum as a center for an ideology which is called globalism, which manifests itself in mass immigration, as you mentioned, but also in the ridiculous environmentalist policies, the continuous destabilization of places like Ukraine, places like the Middle East, and creating a situation of chaos and crisis that will then lead to ever more government regulations. But the mainstream media in the Netherlands are projecting this as a very far-fetched conspiracy theory and as an idea that is not shared by many people around the world. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here, to show the Dutch public that, hey, there are more people that are aware of this and we're fighting the same fight.
I would think that what's going on with your farmers is very real. It's not a It's not a fever dream. It's not some fable. It's happening in real time. Let me just say right now, for the record, I'm not going to be eating any bugs. Period. I'm going to continue to eat steak.
Excellent.
Big, thick, medium rare, juicy steaks. I won't eat any of your damn bugs.
But in the EU, of course, which is jurisdiction in the Netherlands as well, it's now been approved that bugs can be added to food without it being indicated in the supermarket, in the grocery store. And we've been the only party that is saying, okay, if you're even going to do it, we're against it in principle. But if you have to indicate it so people know what they're eating. But they want to push it down our throat without us knowing.
That's really extraordinary. That's an excellent reason for me not to eat in your country.
When you come and visit us, we'll make sure you have proper steak from Dutch farmers that we're really proud of. But the fight must also, I think, be fought in Europe, and we need to cooperate in this.
I must say I'm disappointed. It appeared to me just a few decades ago that freedom was on the march in both Eastern and Western Europe. Today, although Hungary stands out as a beacon, the rest of Europe seems weak to me. And even they are not sharing their burden for Ukraine, which I think is another absurdity. Most Americans here don't really understand why we're in Ukraine. They don't understand that we signed a treaty in which we agreed not to push Ukraine into NATO. More specifically, that we signed a treaty that would not allow NATO to mount Western missiles pointed at Russia on the ground in Ukraine. That's exactly what we're doing now in violation of that treaty. And that's actually what this war is about. The idea that Putin wants to occupy Ukraine to rebuild the former glory of the Soviet Union is a fallacy. He's acting defensively after warning them repeatedly that he would do this. The war propaganda in the United States informs us that the Ukrainians are kicking the daylights out of the Russians. There's no evidence from anybody I know in the military.
We are the only party in the Netherlands that have been saying the exact same thing. And we've been accused of being Putin lovers, even being bought by the Russians, which is ludicrous, of course. But in the Netherlands, we had a referendum in 2016, which was about the association agreement that the EU was going to sign with Ukraine, which included the next step of NATO membership, future NATO membership for Ukraine. And we were the party, or we grew out of that referendum as the party that said, no, that's unwise. We shouldn't expand NATO frontiers into Ukraine, because then we're going to be in a full-out war ultimately with Russia. and we actually won that referendum. But so the Dutch were prudent about this.
So there is still hope for the Netherlands.
Right.
But World War is part of the game plan of the globalists, and we should understand that. And it's very clever that they figured out that people here are growing worried and tired of the Ukraine war. So now the entire shift is to the Middle East, and Ukraine is out of our news cycle almost entirely.
Isn't that weird that we have these moments where everybody's talking about the COVID pandemic or whatever, then everybody's talking about Ukraine, and it seems there's this big item that everybody's occupied.
Yeah, it's a campaign of distortion, or I should say it's a campaign of distraction. It really is an information war. My friend Alex Jones is right about this. And it is to distract you from the most important issues of the day.
Let me ask you one of the things that I think are one of the most important things of the day, which is the way transgenderism is being pushed on children. In the Netherlands, from the age of 11 onwards, children are allowed and sometimes even encouraged to take injections that will block their puberty from materializing. So they're told that they can change their gender. Do you believe that's also part of the globalist plan to dehumanize us?
There's no question. They not only want to dehumanize us, they want to undermine the family unit. They want to undermine the natural origin of man. There are only two genders, men and women. Now, I'll be banned everywhere for saying that.
No, we say the same. We agree.
But a child who's 11 years old cannot make these decisions.
Right.
Well, and here in the United States, there's a great move to avoid the parents knowing what the children are thinking, what's being pushed on them. This is a giant fight in this country as well.
Right. And the LGBT movement, if we may identify it as such, is pushed from above as well. Like the super investors, including BlackRock, encourage the companies to have all these woke commercials and to present masculine activity like shaving or drinking beer as something that is...
Again, it's meant to undermine the basic
structure of society.
And the family structure. It is, without any question, part of their overall agenda.
And do you have a message for the Dutch voters? We're going to vote to the ballot box on the 22nd of November, and it's a very decisive election.
Here is my message. In the words of Winston Churchill, never give up. Never, never, never give up. We're in an existential fight for freedom, and this is the final battle. The question is not whether God is on our side. The question is whether we are on God's side. I intend to help lead this battle here in the United States. And to my friends in the Netherlands, you should never give up. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Roger Stone. Thank you very much, Roger.